Well, it's the end of October and daylight saving time will be ending soon. That means we'll be losing sunshine and turning back the clocks. And speaking of people whose clocks is running out of time, it's time for a monthly visit with Fireman Kenny.
WPLG 715, Fireman Kenny's on the air, helping you to stay safe in a world where danger never takes a vacation. And thank you to all 12 of our loyal listeners who are tuning into the show. As you may have noticed, we've got Fireman Bryce and Fireman Brennan filling in as guest co-hosts for this month's episode. Bryce and Brennan, thank you for filling in on this month's show.
Thank you, Kenny. Thanks for having us.
So why don't you guys give it a little introduction of yourselves, and then we'll talk about your show after that.
Absolutely. My name is Bryce Hicken. I am a firefighter paramedic in the city of Fond du Lac. Before that, I was a firefighter paramedic here in Beaver Dam with Brennan. I've been doing it for about 5 years full-time. I do a little teaching on the side, and as you probably know, with us being here, we got a little podcast we do as well.
Yeah, my name is Brennan Buschke. I'm a full-time firefighter paramedic here in Beaver Dam. I started my career as a paid-on-call here in Beaver Dam 2 years prior to getting hired full-time, so about 5 times total fire experience currently. Thanks for having us on.
So Bryce and Brennan are also the co-hosts of the New Dogs, Old Tricks podcast, which was highlighted in the Fireman Kenny Recommends segment last month. So Bryce and Brennan, why don't you tell our 12 loyal listeners about your show?
Yeah, New Dogs, Old Tricks started at this point about 3 years ago, which is kind of wild to think about. And Brennan and I at the time were very new but very into the fire service. We really enjoyed going to trainings and learning as much as we could. So podcasting was kind of starting to take the fire side by storm, and we figured why not give it a try. So we bring on experienced people, some captains, lieutenants, just even firefighters, career, retired, volunteer from all across the country, and ask them questions. And like you highlighted in your segment, we may not be as PG friendly, but it's something we pride ourselves on in terms of we really get that atmosphere of just like you're sitting around the kitchen table at the fire department. And we might sprinkle in a little sentence enhancers, as we call them, when things happen, but we like that when our guests feel that comfortable that it just kind of flows in and seems like you're just having a conversation with the guys.
Yeah. Recently, we got a bunch of civilians to come on, police officers, and we're kind of working both fire, police, and civilians, too, to get all aspects of how we could all work together to achieve one thing, is that saving civilians and making this world a little better.
Yeah, I love what you do because, again, you've had a couple of guests who I'm friends with. You interviewed Lieutenant Matt Weidler from the Beaver Dam Fire Department, also Captain Corey Braunschweig from Beaver Dam, who arguably was in the best paramedic class that ever existed. So I've known Corey for quite a long time. And so I love what you guys are doing. I wish I had that same opportunity when I was your age to be able to do that kind of podcast. But so, again, the podcast isn't for all of our listeners. It's probably more for just those of our listeners who are firefighters or police officers, those in public safety. The average citizen or some of our community risk reduction people may not find as much interest, but if you are going to listen to the show, feel free to pop in to New Dogs, Old Tricks, and they can find that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Mm-hmm. Yep. So we'd like to thank Bryce and Brennan for guest hosting this month's episode, as well as the Beaver Dam Fire Department for allowing us to record in their station. It feels like Beaver Dam's going to start charging me rent at some point. We've been here that often. So remember that one episode early each month is in the former WIBD format. The show would like to honor the memory of the late Rick Jensen by continuing the show in the same format as when we were on the first Tuesday of the month on Magnum Media's WIBD, which is now WRYU. Thank you to Magnum Media for allowing Rick to host the Fireman Kenny Show on the Community Conversation segment for almost 7 years. The Fireman Kenny Show would not exist if it wasn't for Rick Jensen and Magnum Media. Once the call letters and format changed in January of 2024, Rick continued to host the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts until his untimely death earlier this year. If you are in the West Bend and Cedarburg area, be sure to listen to Magnum Media's WRYU, We Rock You, on 101.3 and 93.9 FM, as well as 1470 AM. If you are outside the area, you can live stream the station's website, rockwryu.com, or you can listen on Alexa by saying, Alexa, play WRYU. Also, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe to the Fireman Kenny Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or whatever platform you're listening to the show. Be sure to follow the Fireman Kenny Show on Facebook for updates on the show, as well as information on future guests. And this show is looking for sponsors as well. If you would like to sponsor the Fireman Kenny Show podcast, feel free to contact us for potential sponsorship opportunities. We will mention the National Fire Sprinkler Association when we talk about NFSA-reported sprinkler saves. We're also listing Fire Suppression Solutions as one of our sponsors for the fire suppression tools, or the FSTs, and other items donated to the West Bend Fire Department, as well as fire departments and law enforcement agencies throughout Wisconsin. Here's a word from our sponsor.
Fire can strike without warning, leaving you with precious little time to react. And if you are not prepared, the damage can be devastating to life and property. In the blink of an eye, your home or business could be on fire, with flames doubling in size every 30 seconds, leaving you helpless and unable to respond. Don't let this nightmare become a reality. That starts with being prepared. Our fire suppression products are designed to equip you with an effective response to any fire emergency, all while limiting additional damage, making you the true first responder, giving you the peace of mind that you have what you need to keep your loved ones and property safe until more help comes. Do you have a plan to respond to a fire emergency at your home or business? Protect your family, pets, and property with the tools from Fire Suppression Solutions. Contact us today and finish putting your plan into effect before it's too late.
For more information on Fire Suppression Solutions, you can visit firess.us.
Hey, Kenny. So you normally have a lot of regular monthly shout-outs. I know you just had the Wisconsin State Fire Inspectors Association conference. You have any special shout-outs that you got from there?
Yeah, and there's a lot of people to thank for this year's conference, because we'll start with our sponsors and vendors. So Guy Santelli, one of our board members, who does such a great job with coordinating the sponsorships and the vendors. The conference fees would almost be double for attendees if it wasn't for these sponsorships. So here's some of our major sponsors, and some of them were major sponsors and vendors as well. So we had Ahern Fire Protection, E-Plan Exam, and owner D.A. Maddox is a friend of the show. D.A.'s been on the show at least once before and wants to be on again. Getzky and Associates, Integrity Fire Protection, Johnson Controls, Lee Mechanical, Life Safety Inspection Vault, the National Fire Sprinkler Association, Total Mechanical, and USA Fire Protection. And the remainders of the vendors included Air Maintenance Inc., Allegion, Beja Shriners Burn Prevention, Brycer, the Compliance Engine, Department of Safety and Professional Services, Fire Safety Consultants, Inc., or FSCI, First Due, Inspection Reports Online, or IROL, JM Screen Printing and More, LLC, the Knox Company, National Fire Safety Council, Paul Davis Restoration, Professional Firefighters of Wisconsin Charitable Foundation, SDI Fire, Siemens, Sheet Metal and Air Conditioning Contractors Association, Space Age Electronics, Spears Manufacturing Company, Streamline Automation Systems, Tegris Fire, Victaulic Company, and finally a thank you to West Bend Insurance Company for their full-page ad in the conference program.
Sure sounds like it takes a lot of sponsors to host a conference.
Yeah, it does. And so and especially offsetting the cost. So the biggest point about the sponsorships and vendors is that they know that the majority of the attendees at this particular conference are not in positions to make purchasing decisions. There are some fire chiefs and chief level officers who attend, like Bryce's boss, Jason Roberts, but most of the attendees are either full-time personnel who either run their fire prevention bureau or shift personnel who conduct fire inspections. So just like Brennan's coworkers, JJ Jacek, Charlie Bow, Tony Thomas, and Emily Seifert. There are some civilian fire prevention professionals, as well as volunteer firefighters who take vacation time from their regular jobs to be able to attend this conference. So the vendors really do help to offset some of the costs for this conference. And let's face it, fire prevention is still the redheaded stepchild of the fire service, and there's limited funding for fire prevention activities.
On our show, we pride ourselves and really get to interview some awesome guests, and I think it's awesome and speaks for the fire service that these big name guests or these awesome speakers get to attend these conferences. So it's pretty cool to get a whole list of speakers and have a bunch of people that get to come in and help share their knowledge at these conferences.
Yeah, the Wisconsin State Fire Inspectors Association is really lucky to get a lot of really great speakers, and there's a lot of recruiting from the National Fire Protection Association conference that we get speakers from, as well as local speakers and people from around the state and as well as around the Midwest. So there's a lot of great presentations at this conference. Hopefully hyping up the courses will help improve attendance at future conference and gain traction for people who might think this event is only for inspection nerds. So these presentations included the basic fire inspector course taught by Jason Neck from Eau Claire and Bob Kesnick from Janesville, and they're both board members. NFPA Steps to Safety, which was taught by Carla Klass from the Michigan State Fire Marshal's Office. She was formerly a burn nurse at the University of Michigan Medical Center, and she's been on the circuit, and she's also an award winner from the Congressional Fire Services Institute for all of her efforts with fire prevention. Jen Meacham, who taught the National Fire Academy Youth Fire Center Intervention Instructor course. Ron Ritchie from the National Fire Sprinkler Association taught about high-piled storage requirements. Bill Sullivan and Matt Hamilton from the City of Madison Fire Department spoke on fire sprinkler plan review. John Madak, who's retired from the North Shore Fire Department and also a WSFIA board member, led a roundtable discussion on community risk reduction. Dr. Rich Gassaway from Situational Awareness Matters, who was our keynote speaker. And you can also listen to the SA Matters podcast by going to samatters.com. That's a great podcast. When I was working out regularly, when I was on shift, that is a podcast I would listen to regularly at the gym. Retired Chief Mike Wallace of the Wallace Company, who presented on crafting your brand and enhancing communication in the fire service. David Leffingwell from Honeywell, who presented on lithium-ion battery safety, and he also presented for the Area 1 chapter earlier this year. Brene Ball for presenting on several prevention outreach topics, including using artificial intelligence for fire prevention messaging. Ron Schneider from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, who spoke on forest fires. Gary Peck, who's a friend of the show, from the Department of Safety and Professional Services, who presented on code requirements for wedding barns and migrant housing. Meredith Hawes from the National Fire Protection Association, who spoke on the issue of single stairways for new building construction. So that's a real issue in the fire service because a lot of builders want to build single stairway buildings, and that can become a real issue even in sprinkler buildings. Matt Kodacek, who's also a friend of the show. He's from the Crown Point Fire Department in Indiana. He spoke on autism awareness for first responders. And if you want more on Matt's presentation, you can go to Ben's Blue Bags on Facebook. Javier Anderson, who spoke on the switchover from the National Fire Incident Reporting System to the National Emergency Response Information System. City of Middleton Building Inspector Jim Solander, who spoke on building construction trends. Smart 18 Sheboygan Area Business Representative Matt Vanderpoy and National Energy Management Institute Midwest Representative Matt O'Rourke, who presented on fire and smoke damper testing in HVAC systems. So that's a bigger thing in the fire service right now, and those smoke dampers are now going to require annual testing, and they're going to have the information on site about those testing results. Johnson Controls Fellow and Vice President of Industry Relations, Dr. Roger Reiswig, presented on changes to NFPA 72. Enviromatic Corporation of America, Inc., President and CEO Don Fleiter, and Randall Roth from Great Lakes Fire Protection, LLC, for their presentation on commercial kitchen hoods and suppression systems. And thank you to the Professional Firefighters of Wisconsin Honor Guard for the presentation of the colors during opening ceremonies.
Hey, Kenny, did you do a presentation on dealing with fire codes?
Yeah, so what I did was a review of DSPS 14 and the state statutes 101.14. So basically I was trying to tell where, as fire inspectors, we get our authority from. So it has to deal with a state statute and then in the codes, and then all about where we get our authority and responsibility to do fire inspections, and then a review of some of the basic fire code violations that a fire inspector may find out in the field when conducting fire inspections.
Sure sounds like a lot of great names, great presentations that went on. I think you guys give out awards every year at the conference too. Is that true?
Yeah, so we have our Fire Inspector of the Year, and there were 2 winners for that this year. So we had Appleton Fire Department Division Chief Derek Henson and City of Madison Fire Department Fire Inspector Scott Strasberg. Both great guys, both do a lot of work, and a lot of their subordinates talk very highly of these individuals as well as their superiors. So a lot of great work by those 2 individuals. And then, of course, we had our Public Educator of the Year. So that went to Waupun Fire Department firefighter Abel Kuma. Our Fire Chief of the Year, Janesville Fire Department Chief Ryan Murphy. And then a Life Membership Award was given to Wauwatosa Fire Department Fire Inspector Dan Schmoker. So Dan has done a lot for the Wisconsin State Fire Inspectors Association. He was the Area 1 chair for a really long time. And Dan's done a lot of great work throughout his career, so congratulations to all of those award winners. And we'd also like to thank the conference committee and the Chula Vista Resort for a lot of the great work that they've done. And we've got our new officers as well. So Jason Connect, who was the first vice president, will now be the president. He's from the Eau Claire Fire Department. First vice president is Bob Kesnick from the Janesville Fire Department. He's also the Area 2 chair. And second vice president, Ronnie Mason from the City of Burlington Fire Department. So he is the vice chair for the Area 1 chapter. And we'd like to thank the outgoing officers. So Pete Fletty from the Onalaska Fire Department. He is now going to move into the position of past president. And we'd like to thank Bryce's boss, Jason Roberts, because Jason was the second vice president, but because of his recent promotion, he was not able to run for the first vice president spot, but he will be keeping the Area 6 chairperson position. So thank you to Pete and Jason for all they've done for the Wisconsin State Fire Inspectors Association.
So, Kenny, your newest segment is Fireman Kenny Recommends, where you talk about another fire service podcast. What podcast are you recommending this month?
The fire service podcast that Fireman Kenny recommends this month is the Fire Sprinkler Podcast. So Chris Logan is a fire sprinkler fitter from Ontario, Canada, and does a great job at interviewing people from the fire sprinkler industry, including fitters, designers, and inspectors, as well as manufacturers. You can follow the Fire Sprinkler Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or you can go to firesprinklerpodcast.com.
Speaking of fire sprinklers, what do you have for sprinkler saves this month?
So we've got our monthly sprinkler saves, or otherwise known as fires you never hear about, because there is no news in something that was stopped from happening. And as I pointed out, I'm an advocate of fire sprinkler systems and a dues-paying member of the National Fire Sprinkler Association, www.nfsa.org. Be sure to follow the National Fire Sprinkler Association on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So our first save comes from the Cornell Fire Department. Thank you to Chief Matt Bolding for placing this save on the Cornell FD website. The Cornell Area Fire Department responded to a reported structure fire at Cornell Manufacturing in the city of Cornell during the late evening hours on Tuesday, September 30th. Dispatch reported a fire on one of the machines and underneath with visible smoke and fire confirmed by employees on site. Chief 1 arrived on scene and verified with the shift supervisor that all employees were evacuated and accounting for. Chief 1 and a lieutenant entered the premises to locate the fire and found that the sprinkler system had activated, containing the fire to the dryer end of the paper machine. The fire was brought under control 32 minutes after arrival, and mutual aid units were released. Cornell Area Fire Department would like to express gratitude to the Cornell Manufacturing Management Team for their excellent communication and collaborative relationship developed over the years. Cornell Manufacturing was working on starting production back up on the number 2 paper machine once the fire department cleared and maintenance was on site to assess damage, which appeared to be minimal. Appreciation is also extended to the Chippewa County Dispatch Team for their professionalism in maintaining smooth radio communication.
I think it's important to note that this one was manufacturing and not just either residents or kind of your apartments, which most of ours go to. I mean, sprinklers are important in the house and those apartments, but also in the manufacturing. They can really help things from getting out of hand.
Yeah, exactly. They evacuated the building, but they were able to work right after that, and so it was a good save by the sprinkler system. Our next save comes from a press release on the Oak Creek Fire Department Facebook page. On Wednesday, October 8th at 7:46 a.m., the Oak Creek Dispatch Center received a report of smoke coming from an apartment in the 2500 block of West Orchard Hills Drive. First arriving firefighters entered the building, immediately encountered a victim, and initiated life-saving measures. The victim was transported to a hospital where they were pronounced deceased. There was no active fire inside the building, and the sprinkler system had been activated. Firefighters conducted a search of the apartment and determined that no other occupants were present. The apartment had minor damage as a result of the incident, and one other apartment sustained water damage from the activated sprinkler system. At the time of the press release, the cause of the incident remains under investigation, and further information will be distributed as it becomes available. So while this one is an unfortunate one, that we did have a loss of life, and these ones that have the loss of life I don't typically put out on the social media feeds, but it should be noted that we only lost one life. The building still stands. Other lives were saved in this incident.
That's a great point, especially apartment fires. You got multifamily apartments. It's great to have the sprinkler system up and working to confine that fire to one fire floor or apartment, like you said, to save the rest of the family lives.
Our last save comes from the City of Madison Fire Department. Thanks to Steve Howard from the National Fire Sprinkler Association for finding this one on the Madison Fire Department's website. On Thursday, October 16th at 11:10 p.m., Engine Company 4 responded to the Discovery Building on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus for a general fire alarm. Security met firefighters at the door and informed them there was a fire in the building. The fire had been detected by an automatic fire sprinkler head, which activated and controlled the fire while triggering the building's fire alarm. Engine 4 then put out the remainder of the fire with a 2.5-gallon water can extinguisher. The origin of the fire appeared to be a hamper full of rags or towels in a kitchen. Thanks to the automatic fire sprinkler, damage was contained to the burned items with minimal damage to the wall nearby. The rest of the building was unharmed and fully operational within hours. The incident highlights the importance of protected buildings and facilities with automatic fire sprinklers to contain fire, minimize damage, and prevent injury and harm. The Discovery Building on the UW-Madison campus is home to 2 research institutes and a community hub for science and innovation.
I think this one shows another tool that's starting to get more recognition, at least in the fire service, with that water can. I mean, but I think there's been lots of trainings recently and lots of push that a water can can put out a lot of fire, so it's much quicker. I mean, I don't necessarily know where the kitchen was located in this, but I can only assume with the dorm buildings and the university buildings I've been in that it's not right by the door. So being able to take a water can in and put out any remaining fire, and even if it was bigger, water can put out a lot of fire.
I would agree. So that was our standard protocol when I was a new firefighter with the West Bend Fire Department. So a lot of times, if you were just chasing a fire alarm, that water can would just end up being a doorstop. But there were lots of times, too, where there was a small fire that water can saved a lot of damage, and it's probably easier to drag that water can through a building rather than a hose line.
Speaking of sprinklers and smoke alarms, with daylight savings coming up, I know most fire departments like to make sure that they shout out and remind people that when you turn your clocks back, check your smoke detectors and make sure you change those batteries. Because if you don't have a sprinkler system in the house, all you've got is that smoke alarm to give you an early warning and hopefully save you, your family, your pets, and maybe even some belongings that you have to get us much more early activation.
Yeah, so daylight savings time ends on the evening of Saturday, November 1st. So that's 2 a.m. on Sunday, November 2nd. It's the time when we go from sunshine and happiness to the world of being cold, dark, and lonely. And the fire service wants to remind everyone about their smoke alarms when you change your clocks. So we want to test our smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. We know you're not testing them monthly like you should, so at least test your smoke and CO alarms when you change your clocks. Change the batteries in those units with replaceable batteries when you change your clocks. If your smoke alarms have replaceable 9-volt or AA batteries, be sure to change out those every time you change your clocks. Even hardwired interconnected smoke alarms have a battery backup, whether it's a replaceable or a 10-year non-replaceable lithium-ion battery. If you have hardwired units that do not have battery backup, replace those units with ones that have backup batteries because you lose protection from smoke and fire when your house loses power. While you're checking those smoke alarms, make sure they get replaced after 10 years. Look at the date on the smoke alarm, whether it's a date of manufacture or if they have the date of install written on them, and replace those smoke alarms after 10 years. And just a reminder that smoke alarms should be installed inside each bedroom, outside the sleeping areas, and on every level of your home. So that's part of the Close Before You Doze program, making sure you're not only installing the smoke alarm inside the bedroom, but sleeping with your bedroom door closed. So let's say if you have a fire that's in the living room or in the kitchen area after bedtime hours, it may get up to 1,000 degrees in that common area, but that closed door, it may only get to 90 or 100 degrees, gives you a little extra time. But on the other side, you're going to want to have smoke alarms inside the bedroom with that closed door because you never know what might start on fire, whether it's a television, a phone cord charger, or anything like that. You want to make sure you have those smoke alarms in the bedrooms. Make sure to follow the manufacturer's instructions. So use the mounting hardware that comes with the units. Do not use double-sided tape to mount these units, and don't buy units that are mounted with double-sided tape. So remember, you want to look for units that are UL listed. And so if they're either UL or third-party tested, a lot of those units that you might find super cheap on Amazon or eBay, and they come with double-sided tape, are usually not UL or third-party tested. And we want to talk about ionization versus photoelectric. So photoelectric smoke alarms are quicker to respond to slow smoldering fires. Those are better for areas that are exposed to cooking smoke. And ionization smoke alarms are quicker to respond to fast flaming fires. So those you can have in the bedrooms and in other places that are not going to be exposed to cooking smoke. And last, we want to talk about the carbon monoxide alarms. It's a reminder that November is Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month. You should have a carbon monoxide alarm on each level of the home, and you're going to want a plug-in model with a digital display and a battery backup.
There's a lot of awareness months coming up. What do you got in November?
So for November, we've got, like I talked about, National Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month. So I think I'm going to have Mike Thoreau from the Milwaukee Fire Department Hazmat team to be on to do that interview. Chronic Obstructive Pulmonary Disease Month, so that's including emphysema and bronchitis. Diabetes Awareness Month. Epilepsy Awareness Month. Lung Cancer Awareness Month. Drowsy Driving Prevention Week, which is November 2nd through the 8th. National Nurse Practitioner Week is November 9th through the 15th. Crash Responder Safety Week, which is November 17th to the 21st. Antibiotic Awareness Week, November 18th to the 24th. National Seatbelt Day is November 14th. The Great American Smokeout is November 20th, so that's always the third Thursday of November. And we have Thanksgiving on November 27th.
And what do we have for December?
Well, for December, we've got Safe Toys and Gifts Months. So we're going to be probably with Ashley Baggett and Bria Thalaker from Children's. So they're friends of the show, so we'll see if we can get them on the show again. National Impaired Driving Prevention Month. International Sharps Injury Prevention Awareness Month. Seasonal Affective Disorder, or SAD, Awareness Month. National Hand Washing Awareness Week is December 1st through the 7th, and it always falls on the 1st through the 7th. Older Driver Safety Awareness Week is December 1st through the 5th. National Influenza Vaccination Week, December 6th through the 12th. International Day for the Abolition of Slavery is December 2nd. International Day of Persons with Disabilities is December 3rd. And we're going to talk about Christmas safety and New Year's Eve safety. So before we go into final thoughts, we're going to talk about a segment on Bryce and Brennan's show, New Dogs, Old Tricks. And they have questions that they have either previous guests ask or for the next guest. So why don't you guys talk about how that works and what your previous guest question was?
Yeah, so like we said, the format for our show is where we bring on people that have a lot more experience than us, and we ask some questions that either we've come up or that our listeners have sent in. But then we end every show the same, where we have a question from our previous guest and then task our current guest to ask one to the next one. So it's just kind of a revolving cycle where we get to have these great guests ask basically each other questions. So our last episode was a big one. It was episode 50. So we had one of our great friends, which is crazy to say, Corley Moore. He is a very big circuit podcast guy, one of the most popular firefighter podcasts that we have around here, and it's been awesome to call him a friend and have him on. And so we told him we were doing this. We thought it'd be cool to kind of bridge the gap and bring in the question to the Fireman Kenny show. So Corley's question for you, Kenny, is what makes a good podcast interview guest, and what is your job as a podcasting host to bring it out?
So I would say that a good podcast interview guest is someone who is knowledgeable and able to think off the cuff and able to answer questions. And then as far as the other portion of it, let's talk about our side. So guest scheduling and having the questions and having the scripts and having the statistics available and having anything like, let's say, prevention strategies. So as Bryce and Brennan and I were talking before the show, we were kind of talking about the differences in our formats between our podcasts, where their podcast is able to be more talking off the cuff. So if you have someone that's not scripted and they have to be able to come up with facts and figures and examples and all the issues that they may have dealt with throughout the years. And because, again, they're dealing with firefighters and their careers and everything like that. So it's less scripted, but they can at least write up those questions and send them to the guest. And that way the guest has a little bit of time to think about what they want to say. In the case of the Fireman Kenny show, a little bit more technical, then I actually have to come up with the statistics and the prevention strategies that are vetted to make sure that I am giving my listeners, and again, the majority of the listeners to the Fireman Kenny show are the people who are in fire prevention or community risk reduction, whether it's at the hospital level or at the county level with the health departments. I have to actually make sure that we're on the same page, we have the same numbers, and making sure that anybody that's going to use the podcast for whether it's direction on where to go and any of the items that they're going to use for any presentations to the public or anything that people are going to put on their website. So I'm going to say that making sure you have good pre-production is essential for a good podcast.
So, Fireman Kenny, that was a great answer for Corley Moore's question. Now, as we like to say, it's the hardest part of our podcast because now it's your turn to come up with a question. So, the next guest that we will be having on, his name is Tuna Gardner. He is a firefighter who we met in Georgia at a training. We did a 24-hour hands-on training where we had to kind of master yourself, master the mental toughness, as well as some physical things. He had a pretty nasty injury that he basically worked himself back from and has just some great stories and great inspirational messages that he's got to share. So, Fireman Kenny, what's your question for Tuna?
All right, my question for Tuna is, how do you promote your message to your intended audience above all other noise? So including like political, conspiracy, misinformation, etc. And even though that question is specific for your next guest, that can be for anybody because there's so much misinformation out there every day. And I'll use my prime example. So for years, I thought I was a bad firefighter because sometime in the early 90s, we started talking about how you absolutely had to fight the fire from the unburned side because you could push fire. And that didn't make any sense to me whatsoever, but it made sense to everybody else. So I thought I was the dumb one. Then come flash forward like 25 years later, come to find out that's not even true. So how do we get past all of the misinformation and how do you get your message to, whether it's in his instance to all the people that he's presenting to, or it can even go at the company level. So you have a lieutenant who may have some young firefighters or older firefighters who are listening to other conspiracy podcasts or anything else that may distract from the message that's supposed to be said in the fire service. So hopefully he has a good answer for that question, and that's one you can add to your repertoire of questions for every one of your guests, especially those that are on the circuit doing the conference speaking engagements.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kenny. Thank you very much for providing that. I especially like you said, it could be for everybody. I mean, we get to meet a lot of great people, a lot of people that have great platforms that they get to share messages with, and I think that's a constant struggle that, especially in this kind of side gig that we all do, we struggle with.
So this has been a really great episode, and I'd really like to thank you, too, for your time. So do you have any final thoughts for our 12 loyal listeners?
Yeah, thank you very much for having us on, Kenny. It was really cool to be a part of this. We've been, like I said, 3 years doing this podcast, but it's kind of the first time that we've gotten to mesh things up. So it's cool to see, another side of the podcasting world where maybe a little bit different format, but just as informational, just as fun. And it's pretty awesome. I mean, we've talked about on our episodes and our podcast frequently that the people we've gotten to meet through doing this pays dividends than anything else. I mean, we probably have our 8 loyal listeners, so that's who we usually are doing it for. Our moms both 4 times each. Yep. So, but we said even from the beginning, as soon as we started gaining a little bit of traction or just meeting some awesome people at the startup, that if only those 4 people listened, it still was worth it, because the people we've gotten to meet has been some of the best parts about doing it.
For sure. Thank you for having me on, or having us on, Kenny.
It's not a one-man show, Brennan.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, like Bryce was saying, we meet a lot of great people, and we get a lot of great training out of just talking shop. So thank you very much for having us on.
We would like to thank Bryce Hicken and Brennan Buschke for hosting this episode. For more information on their podcast, you can visit newdogsoldtricks.com. Join us on our next episode when we talk about Carbon Monoxide Awareness Month. WPLG 715, Fireman Kenny is returning to quarters.
They answer the call to be there for you whenever needed. Horwath Family Builders proudly salutes our first responders. Here's another important message on Milwaukee's Hometown Rock.
I'm Battalion Chief Walter Leininger with the Caledonia Fire Department. Did you know heating equipment is the leading cause of house fires? On average, these types of fires cause 500 deaths, 1,300 injuries, and over $1 billion in property damage each year. When heating your home this winter, keep anything that can burn at least 3 feet away from your space heaters, wood stove, fireplace, and even your furnace. If you're using a portable heater, turn it off when you leave the room or your garage, and never use your oven to heat your home. Following these safety tips will help keep your home safe during this winter season. 96.5 WKLH and Horwath Family Builders are proud to salute our first responders. Get more information and links to first responders throughout Southeast Wisconsin online now at WKLH.com.